After divorce at 48, the billionaire CEO's blind date wasn't a man. It was the love she never expected. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's emotional story about two women discovering love in the most unexpected way, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story from our channel. It is quick, it is free, and it helps us continue bringing you more heartfelt, dramatic, and unforgettable stories about courage, healing, and love between women. Your support truly means the world to us. And tell me, where are you watching from today? Share your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Now let us return to our main character and the moment her life began to change. 3 hours after my marriage ended, I approved a deal worth $400 million, and no one in the room noticed that my hands were shaking. At 48, I had become exceptionally good at making difficult things look easy. My name was Claire Whitmore, founder and CEO of Whitmore Dynamics, and that afternoon 12 executives sat around a polished conference table, waiting for me to decide whether we would acquire a company that had taken 20 years to build. Numbers glowed across the screen behind me. Revenue projections, market share, risk, everything could be measured, compared, negotiated. I understood that world. We move forward, I said, closing the folder in front of me. Just like that, hundreds of millions of dollars changed direction. People smiled. Someone congratulated me. My chief financial officer called it another Whitmore victory. What none of them knew was that 3 hours earlier I had sat across from the man I had been married to for 22 years and watched him sign his name beneath mine. There had been no shouting, no dramatic accusations, no final attempt to save us. Just 2 signatures, 2 attorneys, and a silence that somehow felt heavier than anger. By 6:30 the office had emptied. I stood alone beside the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at Chicago as headlights threaded through the streets 30 floors below. I had spent decades building a life people described as extraordinary. Yet standing there, I couldn't remember the last time I had felt excited to go home. That realization followed me into the elevator, into the back seat of my car, and all the way to my penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. When I opened the door, silence greeted me. The dining table could seat 12. Only one chair was pulled out. I set my purse down and stared at it longer than made sense. For 22 years I had known who I was supposed to be. A wife, a CEO, a woman who remembered anniversaries, quarterly targets, birthdays, investor calls, and exactly which expression to wear when someone asked how she managed to have everything. Now one of those identities had disappeared with a signature, and I wasn't sure what remained underneath the others. My phone buzzed against the marble counter. It was my oldest friend, Natalie. Tomorrow, 7:30. One blind date. No excuses. I actually laughed, although there was nobody there to hear it. Absolutely not, I typed. Her reply arrived immediately. Claire, you negotiate with billionaires before breakfast. You can survive dinner with one stranger. I started typing another refusal, then stopped. Across the room, the city reflected in the dark windows, surrounding my own reflection with thousands of lights. I looked successful, composed, untouchable. I also looked terribly alone. Maybe that was what frightened me most. Not the divorce, not starting over at 48. It was the possibility that I had spent so many years becoming the woman everyone needed, that I no longer knew the woman I was, when nobody needed anything from me. I looked down at Natalie's message again. One dinner, one stranger. What could possibly change? Fine, I wrote. 7:30. But I'm leaving after one drink if he's unbearable. 3 dots appeared on the screen. Natalie started typing, stopped, then started again. Finally her answer came. Deal. I should have noticed that she never corrected the word he. The next evening I walked into the restaurant expecting a man. Instead, a woman rose from the table, smiled directly at me and said, Claire? Claire? For one ridiculous second, I wondered whether there might be another Claire standing behind me. There was not. The woman waiting beside the small candlelit table looked to be in her early 40s, with soft brown hair, clear blue eyes, and the kind of calm smile that did not seem rehearsed. Yes, I said carefully. I am Claire Whitmore. Emily Carter. She offered her hand. It is nice to finally meet you. Finally. That word made my confusion worse. I shook her hand automatically, then glanced toward the entrance as though Natalie might suddenly appear and explain everything. I think there has been a mistake. Emily's smile faded into concern. What kind of mistake? I lowered my voice. I was told this was a blind date. She blinked. So was I. Silence settled between us. Then understanding reached her expression a moment before it reached mine. Oh, she said, you did not know. Heat rushed into my face. I had negotiated hostile acquisitions with less discomfort. Natalie neglected one fairly important detail. Emily surprised me by laughing, not at me, but at the absurdity of the situation. For what it is worth, my friend neglected to mention that you did not know. I reached for the safest response I had. Then perhaps we should call it a misunderstanding, and save ourselves an awkward evening. Emily nodded immediately. You absolutely can. Something about the absence of disappointment in her voice stopped me. She was not trying to persuade me. You do not owe me attraction, Claire, she said gently, but we are both already here, and I skipped lunch. We could simply have dinner. I looked at her, expecting embarrassment or judgment. There was neither. Dinner, I repeated. Just dinner. I promise not to propose before dessert. I laughed before I could stop myself. 10 minutes later, we were sitting across from each other. I ordered sparkling water because I suddenly wanted every thought in my head perfectly clear. Emily ordered iced tea and told me she ran a non-profit organization helping women rebuild careers after divorce, caregiving, layoffs, and other major life changes. And you? She asked. What do you do? I stared at her. You genuinely do not know? Should I? That was new. Most people knew my company before they knew me. I run Whitmore Dynamics. Recognition finally crossed her face, but it disappeared almost immediately. That sounds demanding. No amazement. No questions about my net worth. No sudden change in posture. Just demanding. It can be, I said. Do you enjoy it? I am good at it. Emily tilted her head. That was not what I asked. I felt strangely exposed. I redirected the conversation toward quarterly growth, philanthropy, travel, anything measurable. Emily listened patiently until our meals arrived. Then she asked, what do you actually like when nobody needs anything from you? My fork stopped halfway to my plate. Excuse me? Not what you are good at, not what your company needs. What does Claire like? The restaurant seemed to grow quieter around us. I searched for an answer. Sailing? That had been my husband's hobby. Tuscany, business trips, charity galas, obligations. Even the art hanging in my penthouse had been chosen by a designer. I opened my mouth and realized I had nothing. Emily did not rescue me from the silence. Somehow, that made it kinder. I do not know, I finally admitted. Saying those 4 words felt more vulnerable than announcing my divorce. Emily smiled softly. Then maybe 48 is not too late to find out. Outside the windows, rain had begun streaking the glass, turning Chicago's lights into blurred ribbons of gold. I should have felt relieved when dinner ended. Instead, when Emily reached for her coat, one unexpected thought rose above all the others. I did not want the evening to be over. The rain had become steady by the time Emily and I stepped outside, and for a moment we stood beneath the restaurant awning, watching headlights shimmer across the wet pavement. My driver was still 20 minutes away, so Emily offered to wait with me. I should have declined. Instead, I found myself strangely grateful for those extra minutes. You really did not know who I was? I asked. Emily smiled. I knew your name. I just did not research you before dinner. Why not? Because I wanted to meet a person, not a search result. That sentence followed me home. 3 days later, I was sitting behind my desk when my assistant handed me a folder containing charitable organizations seeking corporate grants. Halfway through the stack, I saw Emily's name. Her organization, Second Chapter Chicago, helped women return to work after divorce, years spent caring for family, or unexpected career setbacks. Their numbers were impressive. Their bank balance was not. I called Emily before I could talk myself out of it. Claire? Hearing my name and her voice created an unexpected warmth in an otherwise ordinary Tuesday. "I found your funding application." There was a pause. "I was wondering when your company would connect me to you." "You need funding. Most nonprofits do." "How much?" Another pause. "That depends on what you mean." I leaned back. "I mean, how much would stabilize the organization for the next year?" "Claire, I did not ask you for a personal check." "I know. I am offering one." Her answer came gently but immediately. "No." I actually looked at my phone. People rarely told me no. "Emily, I can solve this problem today." "You can solve the financial problem. That is not necessarily the same thing." I felt my patience tightening. "Money keeps programs open." "Yes, but before you rescue something, should you not understand what you are rescuing?" I said nothing. Emily continued. "Come by Thursday. Meet the women. Listen to them. Then decide whether this matters to you." Thursday afternoon, I walked into second chapter wearing a suit that probably cost more than their monthly utility bill, and I immediately felt ridiculous. The center occupied the second floor of an old brick building on the north side. There were mismatched chairs, donated laptops, handwritten encouragement cards taped to the walls, and a coffee machine that sounded as though retirement was overdue. Yet the room felt more alive than my executive floor. Emily introduced me simply as Claire. Not billionaire, not chief executive officer. Claire. I sat with a woman named Susan, who had spent 17 years raising 3 children before trying to restart her accounting career. Another woman, Margaret, had cared for her mother for nearly a decade and worried employers would see the gap on her resume instead of the devotion behind it. I listened, really listened. Somewhere between their stories, my prepared questions became irrelevant. These women were not asking to be rescued. They wanted a fair chance to rebuild. And suddenly I understood why Emily had refused my check. Near the end of the afternoon, I found her stacking folding chairs. "You were right," I said. She glanced over. "I am going to need that in writing." I laughed, then helped her with the next chair. "I came here thinking I could fix something. And now?" I looked around the room. "Now I think I needed to understand it first." Emily's expression softened. "That is a good place to start." On the wall behind her was a handwritten sign that read, "Your next chapter does not have to apologize for the last one." I stared at those words longer than I intended. For the first time since my divorce, I wondered whether I had been thinking about my own life completely backward. Maybe starting over was not evidence that I had failed. Maybe it was evidence that I was finally willing to change. Then Emily touched my arm lightly and asked, "Coffee?" I looked at her hand, then at her face, and felt that same unfamiliar spark of possibility. "Yes," I said. And this time I knew I was not agreeing because of the nonprofit. Coffee became dinner without either of us admitting when the change happened. Emily knew a small diner 3 blocks from second chapter, the kind of place I had passed countless times without noticing. There were red vinyl booths, handwritten specials behind the counter, and a waitress who greeted Emily by name before bringing her iced tea without asking. "Welcome to my glamorous world," Emily said. "I like it," I replied, surprising myself. There was nothing to perform here. Nobody approached our table to discuss business. Nobody cared about Whitmore dynamics. When Emily ordered blueberry pancakes for dinner, I laughed. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. I just cannot remember the last time I saw an adult order pancakes at 7 o'clock. That sounds like a Claire problem." Somehow, around Emily, I kept laughing at things that normally would have annoyed me. Over the next 2 weeks, we found increasingly unnecessary reasons to see each other. I invited her to discuss a potential corporate partnership. She asked me to review a mentoring program. I sent her an article at 11:30 one night. She replied 3 minutes later. Soon the messages stopped being about work. She asked what music I listened to when nobody else was around. I admitted I loved old Motown records, something even Natalie had forgotten. Emily confessed that she sang badly while cooking and refused to apologize for it. One Saturday morning, she sent me a photograph of a crooked pancake with the message, "This one looks like Illinois." I stared at my phone smiling until my housekeeper asked whether everything was all right. Everything was not all right. Everything was becoming unfamiliar, and I was beginning to enjoy it. The following Thursday, Emily and I met again at the diner after a long planning session. By the time we stepped outside, Chicago had disappeared beneath a curtain of spring rain. My driver texted that traffic had stopped several blocks away. "There is an awning over there," Emily said. We hurried beneath it, laughing as the wind pushed rain toward us anyway. My expensive coat was damp. My hair was probably ruined. For once, I did not care. Emily looked at me and smiled. "What?" I asked. "You are different outside the office. Better or worse? More real." The words landed somewhere unexpectedly deep. A drop of rain rested against my cheek. Emily lifted her hand almost without thinking and gently brushed it away. Everything inside me became quiet. Her hand lowered, but neither of us moved. I could hear the rain striking the sidewalk and the distant rhythm of traffic. Emily's blue eyes held mine, questioning without demanding. My heartbeat quickened. Was she feeling this too? Was I imagining something because I was lonely? Or had I spent my entire life refusing to ask myself certain questions because I was afraid of the answers? Emily moved slightly closer. I did not step away. For one suspended second, I thought she might kiss me. More unsettling was the realization that part of me wanted her to. Fear arrived immediately afterward. I stepped back. "I cannot," I whispered. Emily's expression changed, but there was no anger in it, no embarrassment, no attempt to convince me. "Okay," she said softly. That was all. My driver pulled up less than a minute later. Emily waited until I was safely inside before walking toward the train station. I watched her disappear through the rain and expected relief. Instead, I felt an ache I could not explain. That night, standing alone in my penthouse, I kept replaying the moment beneath the awning, not because Emily had almost crossed a line, but because she had respected it the instant I drew one. And sometime after midnight, I finally admitted the question I had been avoiding since our first dinner. What if I was not afraid of Emily at all? What if I was afraid of how much I wanted to know who I became when I was with her? For 3 days after the rain, Emily did not mention what had almost happened, and somehow her silence made it impossible for me to stop thinking about it. She still sent me updates about second chapter. She still answered my messages. She was warm, professional, completely herself. I was the one who had changed. On Sunday morning, I stood in my kitchen making coffee and realized I had spent 22 years choosing what made sense. My marriage had made sense. David had been intelligent, dependable, ambitious, and kind in ways that mattered. That was the uncomfortable truth. There was no villain in our divorce. We had simply become two people maintaining a life neither of us knew how to question. I remembered our first apartment, our first promotion celebrations, the vacations we planned months in advance. We had loved each other. Maybe that was why accepting the end had been so difficult. If something was not terrible, were you allowed to admit it was no longer right? My phone rang. David. I almost ignored it, then answered. "Claire, I found another box of your things." His voice sounded familiar enough to pull 20 years into a single second. "I can have someone pick it up. You could come yourself." An hour later, I stood inside the house we had once shared in Lincoln Park. David handed me a cardboard box filled with photographs, old conference badges, and a blue ceramic mug I had forgotten existed. "Do you remember this?" he asked. I smiled. "Seattle, 1999. You hated that conference. I hated every conference back then." He laughed, and there it was, proof that our marriage had contained genuine happiness. David studied me for a moment. "You seem different." My stomach tightened. "Different how?" "I do not know. Lighter, maybe." I thought about Emily under the awning. "I have been trying new things." "Good," he said, and there was no bitterness in his voice. Driving home, I realized something that unsettled me more than anger would have. I did not need to rewrite my marriage as a mistake to justify wanting a different future. David had been part of a life I had genuinely chosen. But somewhere along the way, I had stopped choosing and started continuing. That afternoon, I opened the box on my living room floor. Beneath the photographs was a notebook from college. On one page, 21-year-old Claire had written a list titled, "Things I Want Before I Turn 50." learn Italian, see the northern lights, start my own company, take a road trip without reservations, learn to play piano, fall completely in love. I stared at the last line. Had I meant David when I later checked that invisible box? Probably, yet something about those words felt unfinished. My phone buzzed. Emily. I am making terrible pancakes again. Second opinion required. I smiled, but my fingers hovered over the screen. I wanted to see her. That truth came easily now. Understanding why was harder. I typed, "What if I bring decent coffee?" Her response arrived almost immediately. "Then I might forgive your criticism of my pancakes." 40 minutes later, I was standing outside Emily's modest apartment, holding 2 coffees and feeling more nervous than I had before investor presentations worth billions. She opened the door wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt, and her smile made something inside me settle. "You came," she said. "I wanted to." The words escaped before I could polish them into something safer. Emily looked at me for a quiet moment. "That sounds like progress." I followed her inside, carrying coffee and 27 years of unanswered questions, and for the first time, I understood that Emily was not asking me to become someone new. She was simply making it harder for me to keep pretending I had already discovered every part of myself. By the night of the second chapter fundraiser, I had learned something dangerous about happiness. Once you remember what it feels like, pretending you do not miss it becomes almost impossible. The event was held in a renovated community hall near Lincoln Square, far removed from the hotel ballrooms where I usually attended charity dinners. There were paper flowers on the tables, photographs of program graduates along the walls, and volunteers carrying trays because hiring a full catering staff would have cost too much. Emily moved through the room, greeting everyone by name. I watched her congratulate a woman who had just accepted her first job in 12 years, then kneel beside an older volunteer who needed help finding her reading glasses. Emily made people feel visible. I wondered when I had started wanting her to look at me that way too. After the last guest left, I found her stacking chairs. "You have volunteers for that," I said. "So do you." She pointed toward a stack beside me. I removed my jacket and picked up the first chair. Emily stared. "Claire Whitmore is stacking folding chairs? Do not tell the business press. Your reputation would never recover." 20 minutes later, we were laughing over a crooked tower of chairs that refused to cooperate. My feet hurt. My hair had escaped whatever careful arrangement it had started in. I felt wonderful. Emily leaned against a table and looked at me with that quiet expression I had come to recognize. "What?" I asked. "Nothing, Emily," she smiled. "I just think this might be the first thing you have done all week that nobody can put in a quarterly report." I laughed, then became unexpectedly still. "You know what frightens me about you?" Her smile disappeared. "That sounds promising. You make ordinary things feel important." Emily considered that. Maybe they already were. The room seemed suddenly quieter. Somewhere near the kitchen, an old clock ticked steadily. I stepped closer, not because I had decided anything, but because for once, I did not want fear making the decision before I could. "About that night in the rain," I began. "You do not owe me an explanation. I know, that was precisely why I wanted to give her one. I was not uncomfortable because you were too close." Emily waited. My heartbeat seemed impossibly loud. "I was uncomfortable because I wanted you to be." Her expression softened. "Claire, I do not know what this means yet. Then we do not have to name it tonight." She gave me every opportunity to step away. I did not. When I moved closer, she met me halfway, and our first kiss was brief, gentle, and almost impossibly simple. There were no fireworks, no dramatic revelation, just warmth, and a strange sense of recognition. When we separated, Emily searched my face. "Are you okay?" I should have said yes. Instead, I whispered, "That is the problem." Because I was okay. More than okay. Nothing about that moment felt frightening until I realized how natural it had felt. 22 years of assumptions shifted beneath my feet. I picked up my jacket with trembling hands. "Claire, you can stay." "I know. I just need to think." Emily did not follow me when I left. She did not demand certainty I could not give her. Outside, the Chicago night was cool and clear. I walked nearly half a mile before calling my driver, trying to understand why something so gentle had unsettled me so completely. Then the answer came, simple and terrifying. I had spent my entire adult life believing I knew exactly who I was. One quiet kiss had not erased that woman. It had simply revealed that there might be more of her left to discover. For 4 days after the fundraiser, Emily gave me exactly what I had asked for: space. I discovered very quickly that space could feel remarkably similar to absence. I opened our message thread more times than I wanted to admit, reading old conversations about pancakes, music, and the terrible coffee machine at second chapter. Each time, I almost wrote something. Each time, fear convinced me to wait. Then Monday morning arrived with a different kind of message. My communications director entered my office before 8 and closed the door behind her. "Claire, there is a photograph circulating online." She placed a tablet on my desk. The image showed Emily and me leaving the fundraiser together. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing dramatic. We were simply smiling at each other beneath the streetlights. Yet the headline beneath it had already turned a private moment into public speculation. My stomach tightened. By 9, 2 board members had called. By 10, my public relations team had prepared a statement I had never requested. Nobody openly criticized Emily. That almost made it worse. They used careful words like distraction, timing, perception, and shareholder confidence. I had spent my career refusing to let other people define my decisions, yet suddenly, I was listening to strangers discuss my personal life as though it belonged on a quarterly report. That afternoon, David called. "I saw the photograph," he said gently. I closed my eyes. "So has everyone else." "Claire, I am not judging you." "Then what are you doing?" He hesitated. "You just ended a 22-year marriage. You are lonely. Be careful not to confuse needing connection with becoming someone you are not." The words followed me into an evening reception where Emily was representing second chapter. When I saw her across the room, every instinct told me to walk toward her. Then I noticed 2 reporters nearby. Fear made the decision before courage had a chance. Emily approached with a warm smile. "Hi." "Emily." My voice sounded formal even to me. She noticed immediately. "Is everything all right?" I glanced toward the reporters. This probably is not the best place. Something changed in her eyes. For what? For people to misunderstand. The moment the words left my mouth, I wanted them back. Emily became very still. "Misunderstand us?" "I am trying to manage a complicated situation." "I see." She did not raise her voice. That quietness hurt more. "Emily, please." "No, Claire. I understand fear. I really do." She looked at me with a sadness that stripped away every excuse I had prepared. "But I cannot become something you acknowledge only when nobody is watching. I am not ashamed of you." "Then do not treat me like something that needs to be hidden." I had no answer. Emily took a slow breath. "You do not have to know what to call yourself. You do not owe the world a label. But you cannot ask me to become your secret while you figure it out. I never meant to hurt you. I know." Somehow, her kindness made it harder. She stepped back. "And I do not need you to choose me, Claire. I need you to stop abandoning yourself every time someone else becomes uncomfortable." Then she walked away. I remained beneath the ballroom lights, surrounded by people who knew my name but knew almost nothing about me. For decades, I had believed power meant controlling the outcome. That night, I finally understood its limitation. I could control companies, negotiations, schedules, and public statements. I could not control another person's heart after asking it to wait in the shadows. When I returned home, the penthouse was silent again. The same dining chair stood slightly away from the table. Only now the loneliness felt different. Before Emily, I had believed being alone was simply what remained after divorce. Now I understood there was something worse than being alone. It was meeting someone who made you feel fully seen, then pushing her away because you were afraid other people might see you too. The next morning, I arrived at second chapter before the doors opened, carrying an apology I had rehearsed during the entire drive. Emily was not there. Susan was arranging folders near the reception desk when she saw me. Her expression told me immediately that something had changed. "Is Emily coming in today?" I asked. Susan hesitated. "She is taking a few days away, My carefully prepared words suddenly felt useless. Because of me? That is something you should ask her. I nodded, embarrassed by how easily I had expected access to Emily, simply because I was finally ready to talk. Then Susan added, "She accepted the position in Seattle." I stared at her. What position? A foundation offered her a program director role months ago. She kept turning them down because she believed second chapter still needed her here. Last night she called them back. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. When is she leaving? 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I had negotiated acquisitions with less time than that, but this was not a problem I could solve with lawyers, money, or strategy. I could not purchase another chance. I walked toward the room where I had first listened to the women tell their stories. The handwritten sign was still on the wall. "Your next chapter does not have to apologize for the last one." Susan joined me quietly. "Emily helped me believe that," she said. "I was 53 when I came here. I thought starting over meant admitting everything before had been wasted." "What changed?" Emily asked me why a new beginning had to insult the life that came before it. I looked at her. Susan smiled. "She never taught us to stop being afraid. She taught us that courage is choosing while you are still afraid." The words struck somewhere deeper than any advice I had received from consultants, attorneys, or board members. All my life, I had waited for certainty before making personal decisions. In business, I accepted uncertainty every day. Somehow, with my own heart, I demanded guarantees. I drove to the office and canceled my morning meetings. Then I asked my communications director to come in. "No statement about my personal life," I told her. "Not now, not ever, unless I choose to make one." She nodded. "And the board? They hired me to run this company. They did not hire me to construct a life that makes them comfortable." Saying it aloud did not eliminate my fear. It simply stopped fear from being in charge. That evening, I opened the old college notebook again. Learn Italian. See the northern lights. Start my own company. Take a road trip without reservations. Learn to play piano. Fall completely in love. I had spent years treating life like a checklist, as though completing the right milestones guaranteed happiness. But love was not an achievement. It was not evidence that I had lived correctly, and Emily was not a question about whether my past had been false. My marriage had mattered. David had mattered. That did not make what I felt now less real. I picked up my phone and called Emily. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Emily, it is Claire." My voice trembled, and for once I let it. "I am not calling to ask you to stay. I think I finally understand that loving someone does not mean asking them to rearrange their life around your fear. I just need to tell you something before you leave." I stopped, realizing I was still trying to deliver the perfect speech, so I abandoned it. "I was scared because what I felt with you was real. I am still scared, but I would rather be honest and afraid than comfortable and pretending." I ended the call. 10 minutes passed, then 20. No response. Near midnight, my phone finally lit up with Emily's name. There were only 6 words on the screen. "Then come tell me in person." I was at Emily's apartment 27 minutes after reading her message, although I barely remembered the drive. When she opened the door, neither of us spoke immediately. She wore the same old college sweatshirt I remembered from the morning, with the terrible pancakes, and somehow that ordinary detail nearly broke every carefully prepared sentence in my head. "You came," she said. "I should have come sooner." Emily stepped aside and let me in. 2 cardboard boxes sat near the living room wall. Seattle suddenly became real. "I heard you accepted the position." I did. My heart sank, but I forced myself not to turn my fear into another demand. "Then I am not here to ask you to give it up." Emily studied me carefully. "Why are you here, Claire?" There it was, the question beneath every other question. I took a breath. I have spent my whole life believing certainty had to come before courage. I built a company that way. I built a marriage that way. I built an identity that way. My voice trembled. "You taught me I had it backward." Emily said nothing. "I cannot tell you exactly what label belongs to me. Maybe someday I will know, but I know what I feel when I am with you. I know I miss you when you are gone. I know hiding you was cowardly, and I know you deserved better." Her eyes softened, but she did not rescue me from the consequences. "I love you, Emily. The words were quieter than I expected. They were also the clearest words I had spoken in years. And I am not asking you to reward me for finally telling the truth. Emily looked toward the boxes. I still need to go to Seattle. Then go. Surprise crossed her face. This opportunity matters to you. I do not want love to become another reason either of us disappears. For a long moment, the only sound was the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Then Emily smiled through tears. That might be the first truly romantic thing you have said to me. I laughed, and she reached for my hand. We did not solve everything that night. We decided something better. We would try honestly. 2 weeks later, Emily moved to Seattle, and for 6 months we learned that love could survive airports, late-night calls, missed flights, and calendars that refused to cooperate. Meanwhile, I made changes of my own. When a Whitmore Dynamics redevelopment proposal threatened affordable office space used by Second Chapter and several community organizations, I rejected the most profitable plan and approved an alternative that protected those programs. The board challenged me. This time I did not retreat. It was not about impressing Emily. It was about finally understanding that leadership without humanity was simply another form of emptiness. 1 year after our first blind date, Emily returned to Chicago to expand Second Chapter nationally. On our anniversary, we went back to the same restaurant where everything had begun. No reporters, no board members, no carefully managed expectations, just us. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had walked out that first night? Emily asked. I smiled. Constantly. I think you would have found another way to get lost. I reached across the table and took her hand. Maybe. But I am glad I got lost here. At 49, I still ran a billion-dollar company. I was still learning about myself. Emily remained fiercely independent, and I had learned never to mistake love for ownership. My marriage had not been meaningless because it ended. My old life had not been a lie because my new one looked different. Every chapter had brought me here. I once thought the greatest surprise of that blind date was discovering that the stranger waiting for me was a woman. I was wrong. The greatest surprise was discovering that beginning again did not require becoming someone else. It required finally having the courage to become more completely myself.